Welcome to the return of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, MJ, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOTN. That is correct, I am back. It's been a couple weeks, about a month and a half or so since I've done my last MMA Lock-Cast episode. I tried something new out, with the whole Lock Fight League. Most of you already know what's going on with that. I'm still running that. I'm still doing that. I thought it would get a little bit more live traction. I know that's going to come with time, so I'm not too worried about that. But I know a lot of people were upset about the fact that they were not going to be able to get the breakdown of these fights and these cards unless they actually listen to and watch the LFL stream. So, I listened to the people. I made the adjustments that I need to. You try things. If they don't work out, you fucking get back on your feet and you move forward. So I chose to bring back the MMA Lock-Cast so that you guys could actually get this in audio form. Pop it on your SoundCloud, your YouTube, wherever podcasts are available. That's where I intend on making these things available. But also, the website has dropped. It's been a day or so by now. I'm really excited. It's a new chapter, a new era, as I called it on my Twitter feed. It's got me more motivated than ever. The studying is going to continue. If not, it's going to be more. If that, I got a fire under my ass. I'm really running with this thing now, and especially with you guys will be able to hear the sexiness of my voice because I'm finally getting it done properly. No more, late nights sitting on break at UPS while I'm working, trying to put together a 15-minute podcast for you guys. I'm taking the time out of my week, my schedule, to meet up with my boy Big Rob, to put this on, to do it properly. To do it through a proper system, some proper mics. If you guys could see this, I'm sure you guys could see the setup. It's going to be great. I'm going to try doing a video as well. I'm going to start getting and working on that. I won't be on the first episode, but we're going to work on that for sure. I'm really looking forward to doing that. But for now, audio, smooth, crisp. I'm loving it. I love the way it sounds already. So I'm looking forward to what the future holds. But MMALOTN.ca is the future for this brand and this service. So everything that you need is going to be on there. Make sure you guys check out that website. All the info that you will always need for MMA Lock of the Night is going to be on there, obviously as well as the Twitter, but I'm going to start pushing the website as much as possible. So that pretty much takes care of that business. I'm excited to be back, and happy to do these audio breakdowns for you guys. And it could not be starting off with a better fucking card than what we got coming up with UFC 229, Nurmagomedov versus McGregor. The good thing about this fight card is the fact that we didn't have to wait too long for it to actually happen. And I mean that in regards to when it was actually, or officially announced. I believe it was the July International Fight Week card where they actually announced this fight. And geez, it felt like that time flew by, It's unfortunate that they weren't able to promote it a little bit more. I feel like, they kept reusing the whole Dolly incident and the UFC 223 debacle that happened. They kind of dropped the ball in the press conference as well that they did a week or so ago, where they had no fans in attendance in New York. That was just ridiculous. A lot of people have already said it, but I'm going to reiterate it. Conor McGregor is best when he's in front of the fans and he's in front of an audience to react to his outlandish comebacks or his ridiculous statements or his verbal assault that he put on Khabib and his manager. So it feels like the lead up to this was a little bit underwhelming considering that this might do the most pay-per-view buys in UFC history. This is Conor's first fight since his Floyd Mayweather fight, so I'm sure he's made a lot more fans in that time. He hasn't fought in the UFC since UFC 205, so the UFC is really banking on this pay-per-view to do more than 2 million buys, which seems to be their target right now. Just to give you a quick idea of how shitty the pay-per-view buys have been, their last pay-per-view, which had their potential next big European star in Darren Till, only did 120,000 pay-per-view buys. Say what you want about Tyron Woodley, but I feel like the whole lead up to 228 was all about Darren Till. And unfortunately, fell flat on their face, gets choked out, and now you still have Tyron Woodley as the champion. So Conor McGregor coming back and fighting for them is huge. I'm sure it'll make, probably more money than all the pay-per-views combined this year have made anyway. So I'm sure the UFC's happy to have him back. I'm happy to have him back as a fan, and couldn't come back to a more stiffer test than Khabib Nurmagomedov. So I'm going to go, over that fight later in the podcast. I'm going to start from, the bottom of the card, the Fight Pass prelims, and then work my way up all the way to the main event. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on this card. It's a great card from top to bottom. There's a name in pretty much every single fight. Somebody, that everybody's interested in, minus the fact that Sean O'Malley got pulled due to the USADA violation that came across him. I think it was yesterday or the day before. So, he was a big prospect that they were trying to push, big card for him to be on at UFC 229. But again, USADA fucks us over once again. I'm happy that they have their, their precautions and their policies and all that. But it just seems like there's so much bullshit that comes with it that, maybe we might be better just with the commission doing the drug testing. But that's a discussion for another podcast. I'm not even going to bother getting into that. We're just going to kick it off with the first fight on the card. We got Ryan LaFlare versus Tony Martin. So Ryan LaFlare, 7-2 in the UFC. He's had 4 straight wins, and then he ran into Damian Maia, which was unfortunate. I believe that was his last fight as well. That was a while ago actually. He's since the Maia fight, he's rattled off 2 straight wins, and then he ran into Cowboy Oliveira, which was unfortunate. We've never really seen LaFlare get finished like that, and Oliveira really put it on him and put LaFlare out. That was pretty surprising in my opinion. So unfortunate loss for Ryan LaFlare in his last fight. Wow, I dropped the ball on that one too. He actually fought Alex Garcia on the last back in April. I don't know why I can't remember what the fuck Ryan LaFlare has been up to recently, but it is what it is. He did win a decision victory over Alex Garcia in his last fight, so I can't look too much into that. Garcia not known for the best gas tank, so LaFlare definitely took over in the later rounds on that fight. He's pretty much finished everybody pre-UFC, but then once he's gotten to the UFC, he, just went on a decision streak. All of his fights have pretty much gone to a decision, other than the fact that he got knocked out by Cowboy Oliveira a couple fights ago. So he's really got to turn it up. He's really got to, put on a bit of a statement. He's about a -200 favorite on this event. So, pretty hefty favorite. He's going up against Tony Martin, who's a BJJ black belt. It's allowed him to notch up only 8 submission victories, but only 2 of those have actually been in the UFC. He's 5-4 in the UFC, so it's a bit of a mediocre record. I think there's been a lot of potential on him, and a lot of people actually want to see him do well. But he just hasn't performed to the hype that actually brought him into the UFC. Most recently, he's coming off a decision victory over Nakamura, which a lot of people played Nakamura in that fight, thinking that he'd be able to get a submission over Tony Martin, but didn't play out that way. Tony Martin still got the W in that. And he's another guy that's like Ryan LaFlare, where before the UFC, before he got to the big show, he was undefeated. I'm not sure how well his competition was leading up to the UFC. A lot of people, they get just fed tomato cans, and before you know it, you're fighting, the big dogs in the UFC, and you start taking your L's. So that's definitely something to think about there. Personally, I'm going to have to go with Ryan LaFlare in this fight. I think that Tony Martin does have some good stand-up, but I think that once Ryan LaFlare gets it to the ground, he'll be able to implement his game. He has really good jiu-jitsu as well, really good dominant position awareness as well. I think that he'll control the fight on the ground, even if he's not getting any type of submissions. But he will grind it out and get this victory over Tony Martin. Next fight on the card, Gray Maynard versus Nick Lentz. Gray Maynard is far removed from the days when he was a lightweight contender, when he was fighting guys like Frankie Edgar and Kenny Florian back in the day. But since those days, he's really, jumped on or fallen on hard times. It's his first fight since beating Ishihara back in July 2017, so he's had a bit of a layoff. But being such a veteran and going through those 3 significant knockouts that he went through a couple years ago, it's probably good to take that amount of time actually off. Heal the brain as much as possible. He took a little bit of punishment in that Ishihara fight, but his wrestling paid dividends, and it showed in that fight. It's been 4 years since he's been KO'd, so it may be enough rest for his chin, and maybe he can eat a punch a little bit more than he used to. Nick Lentz made his debut all the way back at UFC 103 back in 2009, and he's amassed a 12-6 1-1 record in the UFC. He's coming off the losses against David Timur, who was just the way better striker in that fight. Nick Lentz likes to take fights to the ground, but if he's not able to get it to the ground, it's going to be a really tough night for him on the feet. He has a really gritty, grinding style, and his biggest win to date was definitely a Will Brooks guillotine in his... I believe that was 2 fights ago, actually, where he guillotined Will Brooks, but in that fight, he wasn't doing too well. He was getting a little bit out wrestled. Will Brooks was putting it on him a little bit, but it was just like a Hail Mary takedown that Will Brooks went to, and eventually got caught in that patented Nick Lentz guillotine. So maybe just a little bit of a brain fart on Will Brooks' part, but Nick Lentz, that was definitely his biggest win to date. He had a really rough outing against Islam Makhachev. When a guy is the better grappler than Nick Lentz, it is always going to be a long night for Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz isn't really known for knocking guys out, so that's not much of a concern in this fight against Gray Maynard. He's only had two TKOs in the UFC, which were over Michael McBride and Mitsuoka. The thing with those TKOs though were that he was obviously the better grappler out of those guys. He got the back position and was able to pound these guys, just from the back mount, and they weren't able to get out of that position. So it's more so been pitter-patter shots or an overwhelming amount of strikes that have gotten Nick Lentz these TKO victories. So I'm not expecting him to go out there and throw a haymaker and knock Gray Maynard out. So in this fight, I'm actually going to be taking Gray Maynard. I think that he wins the better of the wrestling exchanges. I think that he is the stronger of the two as well, so that will definitely play a factor in those clinch positions and those grinding positions. And we saw last year that Gray Maynard is still capable of grinding and getting his wrestling off. Landing those double legs and those trips against the cage. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a battle at first. But I think that Gray Maynard eventually gets the better of the grappling exchanges and then lands some good shots on top, slowly coming to a 50-minute decision victory. So I got Gray Maynard in that fight. Next up, we got Scott Holtzman against Alan Patrick. I didn't get a chance to really look into Holtzman as much. I know a little bit, enough about him that, I was very surprised that he was an underdog in his Daryl Horcher fight, or that fight was lined as close as it was. I didn't pull the trigger on that fight, which I was really hating myself for afterwards when he got the victory. But this was a fight where I was kind of looking to maybe bet him as an underdog, see if I can get that dog money on him again. But Alan Patrick, very good grappler, very good jiu-jitsu. He doesn't make it hidden, or he doesn't try to hide the fact that he's trying to get you down. He has very wild striking, but he uses that wild striking to close the distance, get a hold of you, push you against the cage, and then eventually get you down. So I favor the grappler, as all most of you know. So I'm going to have to go with Alan Patrick on this fight. I just think that his range and his ability to close the gap will play a factor in this. I don't think Holtzman does a good job of getting out of bad positions, and just how big and powerful Alan Patrick is. I truly think that he's going to be able to grind out a decision over Scott Holtzman. I wouldn't even be surprised to see a submission, so that's something to look out for. So my official pick, Alan Patrick by decision. Next fight, Lina Lansberg against Yana Kunitskaya. Both ladies that have been, had the unfortunate task of having to go in there with Chris Cyborg. Kunitskaya had to fight Cyborg in his last fight, and she wilted right away. The fight did not last that long. If I'm not mistaken, it was less than a minute. Lansberg, on the other hand, put up a little bit more of a fight. She just seems like the more lethal and ruthless woman out of these two. It's when you get two strikers like this fight, it's pretty clear that it's going to go to a decision or a split decision of some sort. I favor Lansberg, even though she's the underdog. I think that her pressure and aggression might be able to break Kunitskaya and make it a more rougher fight than Kunitskaya is ready for. But Kunitskaya does have some good striking on the outside, some good jiu-jitsu from her bottom, from her back. But I don't think that fight's actually going to get to the ground. I think Lansberg is going to do what she can to keep it on the feet, and I think that Kunitskaya will be comfortable with that as well. So I'm going to lean Lansberg in this fight. I think she wins a decision as well. Unfortunately, a couple decisions to go to rattle off the card, but I think the Fight Pass prelims are going to be a long night. Moved on to the I guess so they call the UFC Fight Pass prelims the early prelims, and then they got 4 more fights which are prelims as well. I don't fucking get it. They should just make it all prelims, drop it all at once. Just put all the prelims on Fight Pass. And who the fuck is gonna tune into TSN 5, or who the fuck is gonna tune into Fox Sports 17 to watch 4 fights? Obviously, the hardcores in us are going to do it. We're going to search it out, but the hardcores also know that all these fights are available on UFC Fight Pass. So just put all the prelims on Fight Pass and then put the main cards on whatever, Fox, ESPN, whatever the fuck else, pay-per-view. Just do that for us, UFC, please. You guys got the ESPN deals kicking off in January, so hopefully there's some changes that can be made over there. But quit it with this fucking prelim main card bullshit. So yeah, first fight on for me, since I'm in Canada, first fight on the TSN 5 prelims is Aspen Ladd against Tonya Evinger. Tonya Evinger, former bantamweight champion Invicta, was brought in just like Lansberg and Kunitskaya to be fed to the wolves. That is Chris Cyborg. She put up a decent fight as well. Eventually could not keep up. Was pummeled by the beast that is Chris Cyborg. But that pretty much guarantees your spot on the UFC roster. So it's kind of like a rite of passage. These women got to get fucking murked by Chris Cyborg, and then they're guaranteed a spot on the roster. So she's going up against Aspen Ladd this time around. I think the fact that Aspen Ladd's in the better shape. We've all seen that picture that's been circulating on Twitter where she just looks fucking jacked and ripped. She looks in great shape. I think that she's going to be able to be the younger, more athletic, more explosive competitor in this fight. Tonya Evinger is pretty old now, if I'm not mistaken. She's like late 30s. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, she's 37. Like, she's had 26 fights. She's up there in age, man. Like, her experience might be a an X factor in this fight, as Aspen Ladd's only had 6 fights. But she's undefeated. Aspen Ladd has been, what is that? Five finishes in 6 fights, including a finish over Lina Lansberg, who is a tough motherfucker. So I think that Aspen Ladd is going to get the better of the grappling exchanges. I wouldn't even be surprised if she ends up winning via ground and pound in the second round. So hopefully that might be the first finish of the night if my predictions are correct. So Aspen Ladd via decision. Next fight, Vicente Luque against Jalin Turner. This fight was added pretty late, actually. Vicente Luque wasn't actually scheduled to be on this card, but I think it was like less than a month notice for both guys. So, this is unfortunate for Vicente Luque, who's just been tearing shit up. He should be fighting a welterweight contender at this point. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 1 in his last 7 fights. Wins over a knockout over Chad Laprise in his last fight. Darce choked Nico Price before that. Lost a unanimous decision to Leon Edwards, who's one of the top lightweights out there right now. One of the top welterweights out there right now. So it's it's not bad. Like, all of his wins in the UFC have been a finish as well. Fucking Anaconda choke, Darce choke, KO, Darce choke, KO. So he should be fighting somebody that's not a UFC newcomer. I don't know much about Jalin Turner. I didn't bother looking into this fight that much due to the fact that Vicente Luque was a -750 favorite as soon as the odds dropped. So why the fuck waste my time, right? Once I do get a little bit more time, I may, look into these fights. But when the odds are that wide, there's absolutely no reason for me to look into it. So I'm just going to take Vicente Luque by KO first round. Fuck it. Next fight on the card, Sergio Pettis versus Jussier Formiga. I am stoked for this fight. This is a great fight. Sergio being one of the first Pettis brothers that's going to be competing on this card, as his brother Anthony is in the co-main event. Sergio Pettis doing pretty well recently. He, beat a vet in his last fight in Joseph Benavidez, but that, could be also pointed to the fact that Benavidez has been out for a while. He just did not look like himself. I did bet Joseph Benavidez in that fight, and it was excruciating to watch, man. Like, it was like Benavidez was a shell of himself. I think if the Benavidez that we know showed up that night, Sergio would be coming off a loss right now. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's 5-1 in his last 6. Only loss coming to Henry Cejudo, who's now the flyweight champ after beating Demetrius Johnson. I think this is, he's favored in this fight against Jussier Formiga, who's been a flyweight staple for a long time. You're talking about a guy with 26 fights, black belt in judo, black belt in BJJ, and everybody knows how dangerous he is off, with his jiu-jitsu. He may only have 10 submission victories, which is less than half of his wins in total, but, he's a jiu-jitsu killer. He will find your neck if the fight hits the ground. And I think that the fact that, Pettis has shown that he can be vulnerable if he is taken down. And if Jussier Formiga can get the fight to the ground, I think that would be a very interesting fight. Sergio Pettis is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but you're talking about Jussier Formiga, who's been a black belt since fucking Sergio was probably 10 years old. Sergio is only 25. You guys need to remember he's only born in 93, so he's relatively young. And Formiga has years and years. He's 8 years older than Pettis, and that's 8 more years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So all it comes down to is if Sergio Pettis can keep Jussier Formiga on the outside with his kicks, if he's able to implement his taekwondo type of striking, and his takedown defense is on point, he should be able to win this fight. However, if Jussier Formiga is able to close the distance, get Sergio Pettis against the cage, somehow drag him down, even if it means pulling guard, whatever he can do, if as long as he can get Pettis down every round, he has a high chance of actually submitting Sergio Pettis. So I'm actually going to go with Jussier Formiga in this fight. I think that he finds a way to get it to the ground, and I think he finds a way to submit Pettis. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's as simple as this fight can be. Sergio can win on the feet, Jussier Formiga can win on the ground, and as simple as that. And I think that Formiga eventually gets it to the ground. So I'm going to take Jussier Formiga second round submission. The next fight was actually supposed to be Sean O'Malley against Quinonez or El Teco, but we know what happened. O'Malley got pulled. I was very stoked for that fight. I'm very stoked for the progression of Sean O'Malley. He's a very one-in-a-kind character. I'm going to, after this podcast, I'm going to show my boy Big Rob Sean O'Malley. He's going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? I'm a fan immediately. Like, this guy is a pothead, doesn't hide it, wears weed robes wherever the fuck he goes. He has he looks like the Disco Afro Man from The Simpsons. Yeah, he has the funky glasses all the time. Disco Stu. He looks like fucking Disco Stu. It's hilarious. And he's 24, 25 years old, which is hilarious. Okay. So, I can't wait to show you that. But yeah, unfortunately, he can't find on this card. I can't wait for him to come back. Big star in the making. Moving on to the main card. Michelle Waterson versus Felic Herrig. Fun fight. Kind of important for the strawweight division, in my opinion. Michelle Waterson, former Invicta Atomweight champion. Felic Herrig has been on a streak a little bit until she ran into Karolina Kovacevic. She cashed as a big underdog against Alexa Grassa, I think 3 or 4 fights ago. A lot of people were counting Felic Herrig out of that fight. It's unfortunate, but she showed that she's still got it. She's a pretty strong or strawweight, and she's going to dwarf Michelle Waterson in terms of size and showing her that Felic Herrig is a real strawweight. So Michelle Waterson is 3-2 in the UFC. She's only lost to Rosa Namajunas and Tisha Torres. She beat the bigger Courtney Casey in her last fight, but stylistically and skill-wise, Herrig is much better than Courtney Casey. And we're going to see that in this fight. I think that Felice Herrig is going to be able to work her in kickboxing against Michelle Waterson's karate and unorthodox striking. And if it gets into clinch positions, which I think it will get to on numerous occasions, I think Felice Herrig being the bigger, stronger, and more tools in the clinch, I think is going to be the benefactor in this fight. And I think that Felice Herrig will be victorious. I think that she decisions Michelle Waterson, which is sad. You know what I mean? I love Karate Hottie, like sickest fucking nickname, and she's a hottie. But you know, unfortunately, this is not the weight class for her. And the UFC, I don't ever see them bringing in the 105-pound division. So unfortunately, she's gonna have to go back to Invicta after Felice Herrig wins this decision. Yeah, I'm gonna take her by decision. Now, this is where the real fun begins, in my opinion. I've said the whole card is stacked. You know, it's fun. It's great. You know, great Maynard, Lina, Lansberg, Vicente, Luque, Sergio, Pettis. But main card, guys. Derrick Lewis versus Alexander Volkov. First of the 4 major fights, in my opinion. I say major as a hardcore fan as well. So some of you may be like, what the fuck? Who the hell is Dominick Reyes? You guys will know after fucking Saturday night. But let's start off with Derrick Lewis and Alexander Volkov. Derrick Lewis, we know what he's all about. 8-1 in his last 9 fights. Only losses to Mark Hunt. He's been KOing everybody silly, besides the stinker of Francis Ngannou and Derrick Lewis, which was back in May, I think it was. Terrible fight. Never want to talk about or speak about that fight. The worst fight in UFC history. But other than that, Derrick Lewis has been on a pretty good rampage, you know, like his gas tank looks so bad, but for some reason he always finds this way to get like this adrenaline rush of in the 3rd round where he is able to just like turn it on for a couple, you know, for 30 seconds where he just goes buck wild. And more often than not, a heavyweight, the other heavyweight is tired too. So he's able to get away with these late victories over like Shamil Abdul-Rahimov. He had that late surge against Roy Nelson, which eventually stole that round for him, where it was, you know, easily 1-1 going into the 3rd. Yeah, he has no problem turning it up in the 3rd, but it comes in spurts. But now he's fighting a guy like Alexander Volkov, who's very technical on the feet, very tall, 6'7", 81-inch reach. You know, he uses his kicks very well, which is going to be very important in this fight. I think that he keeps Derrick Lewis on the outside with his kicks, beats him up in the body. Like, he'll probably have no issues just beating up Derrick Lewis's body, which is probably a smart game plan. You want to slow down the man as much as possible that, you know, the punching power depletes just as it goes. So I think that Alexander Volkov is well-versed enough on the feet and has a pretty, you know, complete MMA game overall. He can take it to the ground if he needs to, and I think that would be a very smart idea. I think that if he's able to mix it up on the feet at first and then eventually mix in a takedown just to throw Derrick Lewis off, he could win just off the ground too. He might be able to catch a submission. He might be able to get a TKO. He has 3 wins by submission, so maybe not the submission. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but Derrick Lewis has jack shit off his back. So, you know, a purple belt might be a fucking black belt on top of Derrick Lewis. But 20 knockouts and 30 victories. So I would say instead of a submission, he might be more so looking for a TKO or finishing it from on top with punches. Volkov coming off a big win over Fabricio Verdum in the 4th round, which is a 5-round main event. So, you know, he has a lot of steam behind him. He's on a 6-fight win streak. And after this fight, he should definitely be in line for a title shot. You know, we're still figuring out what's going on at the top with DC being champ or double champ. And his fight that he might be having with Brock Lesnar, which might not happen until at least January, February or something. So there's a delay on that. There's the whole John Jones thing going on now too, so DC might end up finding John Jones for the 205 strap, and then we have the heavyweight title in limbo. So very unfortunate spot for Alexander Volkov, but all he can do and all he can control right now is going out there, beating Derrick Lewis, maybe even putting on a statement so people start talking about him. He's a top 4, top 3 heavyweight, man, and not a lot of people are talking about it, and it's unfortunate. So I think he'll get a title shot after he wins this fight. And I think he wins this fight handily. It's going to be a boring fight if he wins, unless he goes buck wild on the ground. But I'm going to take Alexander Volkov by decision. Next fight, OSP versus Dominick Reyes. Another amazing fight, and another very crucial fight for the light heavyweight division. OSP, journeyman. He's been around. He's a vet. He's been in the UFC for numerous fights now. He's always getting a good win streak together and then falling short. Getting a good win streak together and then falling short. Besides his 3 straight losses where he lost to John Jones, Jimmy Manuwa, and Volkan Ozdemir, he's been winning a lot of these fights and stringing them together. Like from his entrance into the UFC, he rattled off 4 straight wins. Then he ran into Ryan Bader. Then he rattled off 2 wins, right into Glover Teixeira. Fei Zhao lost those 3 fights, and then now he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. His last loss being to Ilir Latifi, where Latifi is fucking small, man. You're talking like a 6'3" guy against a 5'10" guy, and a huge discrepancy in reach as well. Ilir Latifi still manages to find OSP's chin, put him down, and then eventually sink in the guillotine choke and put him to sleep. Tyson Pedro almost did the same exact thing to OSP. Tyson Pedro dropped OSP and then just went for a guillotine. He thought he could just mirror what Ilir Latifi did by clapping on the choke and choking OSP out, but that clearly was the wrong move. And it resulted in Tyson Pedro losing by an armbar fucking a minute later. So Dominick Reyes, you're talking about somebody completely different. You're talking about a budding prospect, 9-0, all wins by finish except 1. And a guy that comes in with a lot of potential, a lot of momentum. That's 3 straight wins in the UFC, all finishes, all in the first round. He's just been steamrolling his competition, and he's very methodical when he gets these finishes too. Like the Christensen fight and the Kimball fight, the Christensen fight and the Cannonier fight were both TKOs, but he was very strategic and very methodical about it. He saw that he rocked these guys and that he picked his shots. He didn't overcommit and blow his load just on trying to finish the fight and getting the TKO. He tried picking these guys apart even though they were rocked and hurt already, and eventually found the finish regardless. So I think in this fight it's going to be very important for him to do the exact same thing, because OSP always finds himself getting hurt in these fights. He's a very slow starter, whereas Dominick Reyes clearly is not. Besides that one fight that went to a decision, all of his fights have finished in the first round. He has 8 wins in the first round. That's fucking bananas. He implements a very good striking game plan as well, where he mixes in kicks. And we saw in the Volkan Ozdemir fight with OSP, where OSP didn't really find the need to or have the habit of even checking kicks. And that's going to play a huge factor in this fight. I think that Dominick Reyes is going to start kicking the legs, start making OSP think about the legs, and then he's going to come in with a jab cross or something like that. And he's going to land on OSP. OSP doesn't have the best distance management and range. And I think that's where Dominick Reyes is going to thrive. I think he's going to close the distance. He's going to land on OSP's chin. He's going to put him down and just be methodical about the finish, whether it's a choke that he goes for or if it's a TKO finish. I think that Reyes gets the finish early. I think he gets another first-round victory. So my pick in this fight, Dominick Reyes, first-round KO. Co-main event time. Another fight that I'm so fucking stoked for. Like, I'm such a nerd when it comes to this shit. Yeah. This co-main event just has me, let's just fill in the blanks. Tony Ferguson against Anthony Pettis. Let's start off with Anthony Pettis. He always seems to find himself in this position where he might be coming off a couple losses or just off of 1 win, and then he gets rewarded with something. So he fought, he got 2 wins, then he fought Ben Henderson for the title, and he beat Ben Henderson for the title. Then in the next fight, he beat Gilbert Melendez, then ran into Rafael Dos Anjos, which was kind of like, everybody thought it was the beginning of the end for Pettis. That followed up with 2 losses to Eddie Alvarez and Edson Barboza, and then he pulls off a submission victory over Charles Oliveira and gets fucking, rewarded with a featherweight title shot right after that. I know there was a lot of circumstances around that made it a little bit weird and different, and it was an interim title fight that as well. But he's just always getting rewarded somehow. So he loses to Max Holloway, goes back to lightweight, beats Jim Miller, loses to Dustin Poirier, beats Michael Chiesa, and now he's getting pretty much a title eliminator. If he wins this fight, he's right up there. You're talking about Tony Ferguson, who is the former interim champ, got stripped because he got injured. But if Pettis wins, he's technically the interim lightweight champ, and he should be next in line for Conor Khabib. Everybody thinks that Ferguson should be the one fighting Conor, but Khabib is obviously the more wanted opponent for Conor based on the styles and the whole beef that's been brewing. But Tony Ferguson is a motherfucker. Tony Ferguson is just next level crazy. Isn't the most technical on the feet, isn't the most technical with some of the things that he does, but he gets the wins. He's won 10 straight fights. He's won 10 fights in a row. That's unheard of in the lightweight division, which is probably the most challenging division in the UFC. Let's be honest. It's the most stacked, it's the most talented, and let's just run through the guys that he's beaten in this 10-fight streak. Mike Rio, yeah. Katsunori Kokono, yeah. Danny Castillo, okay. It was a questionable decision too in that fight, if you guys remember. Abel Trujillo, yeah. Gleison Tibau, veteran, solid journeyman in the UFC. Josh Thompson, again, solid fighter. Edson Barboza, we're getting up there. That's top 8 talk we're talking right there. Lando Venata, that's unfortunate due to the fact that Khabib pulled out of that fight. Rafael Dos Anjos, we already know, top 5 fighter at that lightweight division. And Kevin Lee, who's arguably, top 3 up there as well. There's Conor, Khabib, Kevin Lee, and Tony Ferguson. So he has the wins. He has the finishes as well. He's finishing these guys. The only ones he's decisioned is like Rafael Dos Anjos and Josh Thompson. He's finishing all these other guys. But he's coming off a long layoff. He's coming off a very severe injury. The LCL injury that he had, leading up to UFC 223 was very significant and very severe. Again, I'm going to keep saying severe. It's a severe injury. He had surgery. It looked all fucked up. And to have an injury of that sort, you should be out at least a year. At least a year he should be out. Nope. This motherfucker's back in 6 months. He's a freak. He just wants to keep training. He wants to keep fighting. And I think this opponent in Anthony Pettis is probably the worst guy you could come back to outside of Conor and Khabib. And even Kevin Lee, let's be honest. Anthony Pettis is the better technical striker. Anthony Pettis is great with his jiu-jitsu and is really good in scrambles as well. And, again, technically, I think he might have the advantage over Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson is a minus 350 favorite, which is absurd. He should not be that big of a favorite. He has the wrestling credentials and the skills to make it a tough night and a long night for Anthony Pettis if he chooses to do so. However, when's the last time in these fights he's actually leaned on that wrestling? When's the last time he actually, grinded a guy out like that? The fact that we haven't seen that recently doesn't make me think that it's going to change for this Anthony Pettis fight. The Edson Barboza fight, same shit. You're talking about an amazing technical striker, and he still finds a way to, he got dropped in that fight, but he still finds a way to win these fights. He fucking dart strokes Edson Barboza in a bloodbath of a fight. So the fact that he's not super technical in the things that he does and still finds ways to win is just ridiculous. But I think in this fight it's going to be something different, especially when you put a plus 250 behind Anthony Pettis' name. I don't think the odds should be that wide. I think that Anthony Pettis has a really good shot of winning this fight if you look at skill for skill, and I think that Anthony Pettis may be able to clip Tony Ferguson on the feet, hurt him, and find a choke, whether it's a rear naked, guillotine, whatever it may be. I think he hurts Tony Ferguson and gets some sort of submission. So I'm taking Anthony Pettis in this fight. It's unfortunate because Tony Ferguson is one of my favorite lightweights. It's unfortunate after amassing a 10-fight win streak that he could possibly, lose out on his chance to fight Conor or Khabib, which would probably be the biggest money fight for him in his career. And to be honest, as a fan, as a viewer, I'm very interested to see what a Khabib Tony Ferguson pay-per-view would actually do in terms of numbers. That would really show, like, is the Conor effect really doing anything? Like, a lot of these guys are connected to Conor, but how many people know these guys now, and how many people are actually willing to go out and watch these guys? But unfortunately, I think there's a high chance that he loses this fight. More so than what the odds suggest. And I'm going to take Anthony Pettis by submission. Boo. Last fight. Main event time. Get ready. Goosebumps already. Like, I'm fucking... We've been... Again. Blah. I can't even talk because I'm so excited for this fight. It was announced back in July. We didn't have to wait too long for it. And it's finally fucking here. We got Khabib versus Conor. Conor, stepping up to the plate once again, as he did against Jose Aldo, and wanting to prove people wrong. Always coming into these fights as an underdog, but always, pulling it out and getting the victory. This Khabib fight, though, is different. This Khabib fight is Conor going up against a guy that has a strength that is so strong in his wrestling. Like, that sounds so redundant. It's so stupid, I know. But he is so good at wrestling and wrestling is Conor McGregor's weakness. Like, we know that he doesn't do well against grapplers. We saw what Chad Mendes was able to do when he got his hands on Conor McGregor, and the takedowns weren't that hard, to be honest. Conor did shuck off a couple, but Mendes still landed 4 takedowns in that fight. And Mendes took that fight on less than a week's notice. Probably wasn't even training. If he was training and he was in a legitimate training camp, I don't know if we would even have the Conor McGregor that we have today. I don't know what that loss to Conor McGregor would have done to Conor McGregor's career. Like, we saw him lose to Nate Diaz, but that's when Conor McGregor already knocked out Jose Aldo. That's when Conor McGregor was already Conor McGregor. So I don't think that Diaz loss had as much of an impact on his career as a Chad Mendes loss on his record. So we got Khabib, full training camp, the scariest wrestler in UFC history, bar none, going against Conor McGregor, whose strength is Khabib Nurmagomedov's weakness, which is striking. So we've seen Khabib get tagged by Michael Johnson in the past. We've seen, that he can get through that and, get his wits about him and then get back to the game plan of eventually getting the fight to the ground. And we saw eventually what happened to Michael Johnson once Khabib got the fight to the ground. One of the worst beatings we've probably ever seen. And then we throw in the Edson Barboza fight, where Khabib goes against another guy whose striking is far and wide way better than Khabib's. And Khabib still manages to get the takedown and puts a huge, enormous fucking shellacking on Edson Barboza. Probably took 20 years off of Barboza's life. But this fight, Khabib, I think that as long as he minds his P's and Q's on the feet, as long as he closes the distance, with some sense, keeps his hands up, a little bit of head movement, as long as he's able to close the distance and get his hands on Conor McGregor, that first takedown is going to be the end of the fight for Conor. I think if Conor's not able to knock Khabib out before Khabib gets him down the first time, I think the fight's over for Conor. I think that Khabib's top pressure is going to be too much. I wouldn't even be surprised to see him finish it in the first round. The aggression and all the emotions that are going to be coming out at that time for Khabib, all the shit talk that's been happening. I think that he's really going to punish Conor on the ground once he gets him there. And we've seen Conor's guard get passed pretty easily in the Chad Mendes fight, in the Nate Diaz fight. And Khabib passes like nothing, man. Like, Khabib's passing is just ridiculous. He's very dominant, especially once he gets these guys in the crucifix position. You can just ask Michael Johnson. So it's either Conor. I've said this on the Anakin Florian podcast as well, but Conor McGregor needs to treat the warning track of the octagon, like the outside border of the octagon, and the canvas as like hot lava. If he sees his feet are outside of that warning track, he needs to pivot right away. He needs to move, throw some feints so he can get out of the way and make sure that his back does not get against the cage. Because once Khabib gets him cornered and gets him against that cage, it's pretty much all she wrote for Conor. It's going to hit the ground no matter what. Conor can't do anything about it. If Conor can do that, he wins this fight. He'll be able to find Khabib's chin if he can stay off the cage long enough and keep moving. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. I think that Khabib is going to be able to close the distance. I think that he's going to, he might eat a couple shots here and there, but I think that he's going to be able to close the distance, get his hands on Conor, and get him down. On the Anakin Florin podcast, I said that third round TKO for Khabib, and I'm going to stick with that. A part of me wants to even push it to a second round, but I'm going to stick with my official pick as a third round TKO for Khabib Nurmagomedov. After, we haven't seen the aggression from Khabib from on top. Again, I think the whole beef with them in this fight may push him a little bit more, but I'm going to say third round just due to the fact that he's going to control Conor on the ground. He'll be able to wear Conor out, and we've seen Conor's gas tank fail him in numerous occasions, even in that Nate Diaz fight, which I'm surprised Nate Diaz didn't push a little bit more and break Conor. But I think it was great that Nate was able to pull it out and Conor was able to get to the fifth round. But it's a different type of fucking beating when a guy like Khabib is on top of you and just sucking you dry of your energy. That sounds so weird, I understand, but you guys know what I mean. I think it's just going to suck Conor's gas tank with that top pressure, and Khabib's going to win a dominant third round TKO. Fuck. I can't believe I got through that. 50 minutes, not bad. I'm glad that you guys, you listened to the first episode or the first return episode. I'm going to keep doing these every fight week, every UFC fight week. We'll plan on recording them on Mondays. I may not have my bets done by that time, but I will still get my predictions and, maybe some leads here and there. But I'm always going to release it probably by Tuesday at the latest. And we're going to keep the show rolling. I want to keep giving you guys content as much as possible. MMALOTN.ca. The site is up. The content will be up there. Podcast will always be posted there as well. You guys can get the picks on there as well, whether they're free or if they're paid. They'll always be posted on that website. So make sure you guys check that out. And yeah, man, I'm freaking stoked. I'm 9 straight Lock of the Night hits, so I'm on fire right now as well. So it's great to have everything kind of hopefully not climaxing, but continuously going up with the drop of the website, with the reintroduction of the podcast, and then these bets hitting as well. There's no better selling point, or there's no more convincing facts that I can give you guys other than actually showing you my results, and I've been showing that over 36 units in profit. In the last 10 events with a 63% ROI, which is probably fucking bananas if you look at the rest of the handicappers out there. But killing it, man. We're going to keep going. Check me out at MMA LOTN on Twitter. Website, once again, MMALOTN.ca. Go check that out. Everything you need is there. And we'll see you guys, or you guys will listen to me next week. No, sorry. Next UFC event is actually UFC Moncton, so that's not till October 27th. So I'll see you guys and drop a podcast for you guys that week, that UFC fight week. So ciao, I'm out. Later. Peace. I'm gone.